So we're going to talk about real trusts as opposed to in-trust accounts, but we just needed to make that distinction. So again, we're repeating ourselves. You need trust property. You need at least one beneficiary. Often you'll have more than one, and you need that intention to create a trust. So in the gift example out of Saskatchewan, the intention was to gift the money to the granddaughter, and that determined what you were doing. She was gifting the money to the granddaughter, wasn't planning to create a trust. And it's always difficult in these cases to figure out what the intention was if it's not documented. So, trust property. There's no trust if there's no property. So you have to, we usually start the trust off with, some people like to use the coin. We like to use a $100 bill because then you can staple it to the trust deed and show there's property in the trust, and we have the $100 go out of the trust at the very end. So there's always property in the trust. You'll hear people talking about settling a trust. That's old legal jargon. We usually talk about establishing a trust, because if we talk about settling a trust, then people think we're talking about pioneer days and what's this got to do with the wagon trains? Now, once you've established the trust, you need to segregate the trust property. So you have to have your own bank account where you put in the trust property, or some way of keeping the trust property separate from your own property. Beneficiaries. Want to handle that?
Sure. So beneficiaries can be named or they can be described, like a class of beneficiaries or specific. So you could say Laylee and her spouse, so that would be named beneficiaries, or you could have a class of beneficiaries like Blair and all of the children and other descendants of Blair. So they might be people that exist, or they might not be people that exist yet.
Yeah, future descendants.
Exactly. Yep, that's it.
And you could say all red-haired individuals resident in BC. So as soon as a redhead comes into BC, they're a beneficiary of the trust. So you can set up rules. It's very flexible. It's best to have a group of beneficiaries, because at trust law, if you have a closed group of beneficiaries, so if you just said Laylee and her spouse are the beneficiaries, so there's no other beneficiaries, Laylee and her spouse can get together and say, we want the money in the trust. They can terminate the trust by agreement. Now, if I don't want that to happen, then I say Laylee and her spouse and her descendants, because then you're not going to be able to get everybody together to collapse the trust, because some of the descendants aren't born yet. So they can't agree to terminate the trust. You would have to go to the public trustee and get the public trustee to terminate the trust, but the public trustee is going to say, well, why am I going to terminate the trust? I want something for my clients, which are the unborn beneficiaries, so you're going to have something extra for them. So it makes it a lot harder. So that's why you always have, if so-and-so dies, then it goes to so-and-so. So you always have other beneficiaries, preferably who aren't born yet. If you want to set up a trust, especially for a child who you don't want that child to be able to collapse the trust, you say child and his or her descendants, because there's always a possibility of descendants. Even if it's a woman and she's past childbearing age, the law says you can have children when you're 82. So you always have a wide group of people. Future generations are useful. Intention. You need evidence of the intention, so usually we have a trust deed in which somebody sets up the trust and says, I intend to set up this trust. Now we also meet with the person to make sure that they intend to set up the trust. The person who sets up the trust, we'll call them the trust maker. If you're using legal jargon, it's the settlor, S-E-T-T-L-O-R, as opposed to a settler. Trust maker sets the rules for the trust. So the trust is sort of a self-contained little set of rules. So what is in the trust document sets the rules for how you deal with the property. So you can't change that document unless you go to the court to get special court approval. So you always refer to the trust deed. So once property is in the trust, if I die, it's not governed by my will anymore. It's governed by the trust document. So it's your chance to set up a self-contained little system with specific rules for that specific property.